The church bell tolled like a death knell, each chime slicing through Elena Harper's chest as she stood hidden behind the oak tree across the street. They were burying her today, her own family, her own blood, declaring her dead because she loved a woman. She clutched the stack of letters in her hand, the receipts of her truth, and whispered to herself, "I'm still here." Elena, 28, had always been the firebrand of the Harper family, the one who questioned the rigid rules of their small, conservative town of Willow Creek, Georgia. Her chestnut hair caught the late afternoon light as she adjusted her leather jacket, her jaw set with a mix of fury and heartbreak. She hadn't seen this coming, not the obituary in the local paper, not the funeral planned in her name, not the erasure of her existence by the people who raised her. Her crime? Loving Maya Chan, the soft-spoken artist who'd moved to town 2 years ago and turned Elena's world upside down. Maya, 26, stood beside her now, her hand a quiet anchor in Elena's trembling grip. Her long dark hair fell over her sweater, and her eyes, usually warm with kindness, burned with a protective fire. "You don't have to do this," Maya whispered, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill. "We can walk away, start over somewhere else." "No," Elena said, her voice low but resolute. "They don't get to erase me. Not like this." She glanced at the church, its stained glass windows glowing like a judgment she refused to accept. The plan was reckless, maybe insane, but Elena was done hiding. She was going to walk into her own funeral, confront her family, and show the world she was alive, unapologetically alive. Willow Creek was the kind of place where everyone knew your name and your sins. The Harper family was its backbone, pillars of the church, owners of the town's only hardware store, and keepers of a legacy that demanded perfection. Elena had tried to fit in, stifling her questions, her desires, her very self. She dated boys she didn't love, worn dresses she hated, and smiled through sermons that called people like her an abomination. But then Maya arrived, with her quiet courage and her art that spoke of freedom, and Elena's carefully built walls crumbled. They'd met at the town's annual art fair, where Maya's paintings' vibrant, abstract swirls of color drew Elena like a moth to a flame. Maya was an outsider, a Chinese-American artist from Seattle who'd come to Willow Creek to care for her aging aunt. Their first conversation, over a canvas of blues and golds, lasted hours. By the end of the night, Elena knew she was in love, and it terrified her. Their relationship began in secret, stolen glances, late-night drives, kisses in the shadow of the old mill. But secrets in Willow Creek were as fragile as glass. When Elena's younger brother, Caleb, caught them holding hands at the lake, the whispers spread like wildfire. By the next Sunday, Pastor Reynolds was preaching about saving lost souls. His eyes locked on Elena. Her parents, Margaret and Thomas Harper, gave her an ultimatum. "Leave Maya or leave the family." "I choose her," Elena had said, her voice shaking but firm. She'd packed a bag and left that night, moving into Maya's small apartment above the town's only coffee shop. She thought that was the end of it, painful but final. She didn't expect her family to take it further, to declare her dead in every way that mattered. The obituary had been Maya's discovery, found in the Willow Creek Gazette while scrolling online. "Elena Grace Harper, beloved daughter, taken too soon," it read, followed by a date of death that was 2 weeks ago. No accident, no illness, just a lie to erase her. The funeral was set for today, a public spectacle to cement their narrative. Elena's stomach churned as she read the words, but it was the comments online that broke her. "Good riddance," she chose her path. "The Harpers deserve peace. They're mourning a version of me that never existed," Elena told Maya that night, her voice raw. "But I'm not dead. I'm right here, and I'm going to show them." Now, as the church doors opened and mourners filed in, Elena felt the weight of her decision. Her parents were there, dressed in black, their faces etched with a grief that felt like a performance. Caleb trailed behind, his head bowed, looking more lost than sorrowful. The town had turned out enforced neighbors, churchgoers, even her old high school friends. Did they believe she was gone, or were they complicit in this charade? Elena's plan was simple but audacious. She'd wait until the service was in full swing, then walk down the aisle, letters and hand letters she'd written to her family over the years, pleading for understanding, explaining who she was. She'd kept copies, knowing one day she might need proof of her truth. Maya had added her own touch. A small painting, a gift for Elena's mother, A gesture of love despite everything. It's not about revenge, Maya had said. It's about showing them who you are. The organ began to play, a mournful hymn that carried across the street. Elena squeezed Maya's hand. Ready? She asked, her heart pounding. Maya nodded, her eyes fierce with loyalty. Always. Elena took a deep breath, her boots crunching on the gravel as she stepped out from behind the tree. The letters felt heavy in her hands, but they were her armor, her truth. She wasn't just walking into a church, she was walking into a battlefield, ready to reclaim her life. The church doors loomed like a gateway to judgment, their polished wood reflecting the fading sunlight. Elena's heart thundered as she crossed the street, Maya a step behind, her presence a quiet strength. Each step felt like defiance, a declaration that she was not the ghost her family had made her out to be. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of lilies and candle wax. The pews were packed, faces turned toward the altar where a framed photo of Elena sat, surrounded by flowers. It was a picture from her high school graduation, smiling, obedient, the daughter her parents wanted. The sight of it twisted something deep in her chest. Pastor Reynolds stood at the pulpit, his voice booming with practiced sorrow. We gather to mourn Elena Harper, a soul lost to us too soon. Elena paused at the threshold, her breath catching. Maya's hand brushed her back, a reminder to keep going. She clutched the letters tighter, their edges worn from years of hope and rejection. The first letter was from when she was 19, confessing her confusion about her feelings to her mother. The last was from 6 months ago, begging her family to meet Maya, to see the love that defined her. None had been answered. The hymn ended, and a heavy silence settled over the congregation. Elena took her chance. Her boots echoed on the hardwood floor as she stepped into the aisle, her leather jacket a stark contrast to the sea of black dresses and suits. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, eyes wide with shock. Her mother, Margaret, froze in the front pew, her face pale as if she'd seen a ghost. Her father, Thomas, gripped the pew, his knuckles white. Elena! Caleb's voice broke the silence, small and disbelieving. He stood, his teenage frame lanky and awkward, his eyes searching hers for answers. I'm not dead, Elena said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She held up the stack of letters, her receipts of a life her family had tried to erase. You don't get to bury me because I love who I love. The congregation erupted in whispers, some hostile, others confused. Pastor Reynolds raised a hand, his expression a mix of outrage and disbelief. This is a house of God, he began, but Elena cut him off. Then let's talk about truth, she said, stepping closer to the altar. She turned to the crowd, her voice rising. My family declared me dead because I'm a lesbian, 'cause I love Maya Chun. But I'm standing here alive and I'm not going anywhere. Margaret stood, her lips trembling. You chose this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You chose sin over family. No, Elena shot back, her eyes blazing. I chose love. I chose myself. You're the ones who chose to bury me. She held up the letters again, her voice cracking with emotion. These are the letters I wrote you, Mom, Dad, Caleb. Years of trying to explain who I am, begging you to listen. You never did. She began reading the first letter aloud, her voice raw but clear. Dear Mom, I'm scared to tell you this, but I think I'm different. I don't feel the way other girls do about boys. I don't know what it means, but I need you to help me understand. Her voice broke on the last word, and she paused, letting the words hang in the air. The congregation was silent now, some faces softening, others hardening. Caleb's eyes were wet, his hands clenched at his sides. Elena wanted to reach for him, to tell him she still loved him, but she pressed on, reading another letter, then another. Each one was a piece of her heart, laid bare for a room that had already judged her. Maya stepped forward, placing the small painting on the altar, a delicate canvas of two figures under a tree, their hands touching, painted in warm golds and blues. This is for you, Mrs. Harper, Maya said softly, her voice steady despite the tension. It's how I see Elena. It's how I see love. Margaret stared at the painting, her expression unreadable. Thomas stood, his face red with anger. You've disgraced this family enough, he said. Leave now, or I'll call the police. Elena laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. For what? For being alive? For loving her. She pointed to Maya, her voice fierce. You can't arrest me for existing. The room was a powder keg, ready to explode. Some mourners stood shouting for Elena to leave. Others sat frozen, caught in the drama unfolding before them. Caleb took a step toward Elena, his voice shaking. I didn't know, he said. I didn't know they'd do this. Elena's heart softened at her brother's words, but she couldn't stop now. She turned back to the congregation. I'm not here to beg for your approval. I'm here to tell you I'm alive and I'm not ashamed. You can mourn the daughter you wanted, but you can't erase the woman I am. Pastor Reynolds tried to regain control, calling for order, but the room was chaos. Elena felt Maya's hand in hers, grounding her. They'd planned for this moment, but the reality was heavier than she'd imagined. She looked at her parents, searching for any sign of regret, but their faces were stone. Let's go, Maya whispered, tugging gently at Elena's hand. You've said what you needed to. But Elena wasn't done. She pulled one last letter from the stack, her voice steady as she read. Dear family, I hope one day you'll see that love isn't a choice. It's who I am. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I'm asking for you to see me. She placed the letter on the altar, next to Maya's painting, and turned to leave. As they walked down the aisle hand in hand, the whispers followed them. Some were cruel, others curious, but Elena didn't care. She'd walked into her own funeral and walked out alive, her truth laid bare. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time she felt free. The night air hit Elena like a wave as she and Maya stepped out of the church, the weight of what had just happened settling into her bones. The town square was quiet, the streetlights casting long shadows across the cobblestones. Maya's hand was still in hers, warm and steady, but Elena's heart raced with a mix of triumph and grief. They didn't speak as they walked to Maya's apartment, the silence heavy with unspoken questions. Had she done enough? Would her family ever see her? The letters, the painting, her words, would they mean anything to the people who'd buried her name? Elena's mind churned, replaying her mother's cold stare, her father's anger, and Caleb's trembling voice. Inside the apartment, Maya locked the door and turned to Elena, her eyes searching. You were incredible in there, she said, her voice soft but firm. I know it hurt, but you stood your ground. Elena sank onto the couch, the letter still clutched in her hand. I don't know if it mattered, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. They looked at me like I was a stranger. Maya sat beside her, taking the letters gently and setting them on the coffee table. You showed them who you are. That's what matters. Even if they don't see it now, they heard you. Elena leaned into Maya, her head resting on her shoulder. The warmth of Maya's presence was a lifeline, pulling her back from the edge of despair. I just wanted them to understand, she said. I thought, maybe if they saw me, really saw me, they'd change. Maya kissed her forehead, her touch soft but grounding. Some people take longer to come around. Some never do. But you're not alone, Elena. You have me. You have us. The word us stirred something in Elena, reminder of the life they were building, fragile but real. They'd talked about leaving Willow Creek, starting fresh somewhere like Seattle, where Maya's family had offered them a place to stay. But tonight, the idea of running felt like surrender. Elena wasn't ready to give up on her home, not yet. The next morning, the town was buzzing. News of Elena's appearance at her own funeral had spread like wildfire, fueled by gossip and social media. Maya showed her the posts on her phone, some calling Elena brave, others calling her a disgrace. One comment from an anonymous account stuck with her. She's got guts. Maybe the Harpers should listen. Caleb's name popped up in a text as they sipped coffee in the kitchen. Can we talk? It read, simple but heavy. Elena stared at the screen, her heart caught between hope and caution. She hadn't spoken to her brother alone since she'd left home, and his words in the church I didn't know echoed in her mind. Should I meet him? She asked Maya, her voice uncertain. Maya set down her mug, her expression thoughtful. He's your brother. He's young, Elena. Maybe he's starting to see things differently. Elena nodded, typing a quick reply to meet Caleb at the park that afternoon. The idea of facing him alone made her stomach twist, but she couldn't ignore the flicker of hope his message sparked. The park was quiet when Elena arrived, the autumn leaves crunching under her boots. Caleb was already there, sitting on a bench by the pond, his hoodie pulled up against the chill. He looked up as she approached, his face a mix of guilt and uncertainty. "I didn't know they'd go that far," he said before she could speak. "The obituary, the funeral. I thought they were just angry, not?" He trailed off, his hands fidgeting. Elena sat beside him, keeping her distance. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with hurt. "You knew I was alive, Caleb. You could have warned me." He looked down, his voice small. "I was scared. They said you were gone, that you'd chosen to leave us. I didn't know what to believe." Elena's chest tightened. Caleb was only 16, caught in the crossfire of their parents' beliefs and her rebellion. "I didn't choose to leave you," she said. "I chose to be honest. To be me." Caleb nodded, his eyes on the pond. "I read some of your letters. The ones you left on the altar. I didn't know you felt like that. All those years you were trying to tell us." "I was," Elena said, her voice softening. "I still am." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history heavy between them. Caleb finally looked at her, his eyes wet. "I don't want you to be dead to me, Elena. I don't care who you love. I just want my sister back." The words hit Elena like a wave, breaking through the walls she'd built to protect herself. She reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "I'm right here," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've always been here." Caleb hugged her, sudden and fierce, and for the first time in months, Elena felt a piece of her family still within reach. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. The days following Elena's confrontation at the church were a whirlwind of whispers and sidelong glances. Willow Creek had always thrived on gossip, but this was different. Elena's story had cracked the town's facade, exposing the fault lines of judgment and fear. She and Maya kept a low profile, staying in the apartment, but the outside world crept in through texts, calls, and the occasional knock at the door. Caleb's visit to the park had been a turning point for Elena, a fragile bridge to her past. But her parents remained silent, their absence louder than any words. Elena tried to focus on the present and Maya, on their plans to leave, but the weight of her family's rejection lingered like a bruise. One evening, as they cooked dinner together, Maya noticed Elena's distraction. "You're thinking about them again," she said, stirring a pot of pasta, her tone gentle but knowing. Elena sighed, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. "I keep wondering if I could have said something differently. If there's a way to make them see me." Maya set down her spoon and crossed the small kitchen, wrapping her arms around Elena. "You gave them everything you had, your words, your heart. If they can't see you, that's on them, not you." Elena leaned into her, the warmth of Maya's embrace easing the ache. "I know. But it's my family, Maya. I thought they'd at least try." The next morning a letter arrived, slipped under the door in an unmarked envelope. Elena's hand shook as she opened it, recognizing her mother's neat handwriting. It was brief, formal, and cold. "We need to talk. Meet us at the house tomorrow. 7 p.m. Elena showed it to Maya, her heart racing. "What do you think it means?" Maya frowned, her eyes scanning the note. "It could be anything: an apology, an ambush. Do you want to go?" Elena hesitated. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to protect herself from more pain. But another part, the part that still loved her parents, despite everything, needed to know. "I have to," she said finally. "If there's even a chance." Maya nodded, her expression resolute. "Then I'm coming with you." The Harper house hadn't changed in the months since Elena had left. The white picket fence, the rose bushes, the porch swing, it was all achingly familiar. But as Elena and Maya approached, hand in hand, the house felt like a stranger's. Margaret and Thomas waited in the living room, their faces unreadable. Caleb was there too, sitting stiffly on the couch, his eyes darting between his parents and Elena. "Thank you for coming," Margaret said, her voice tight. We need to set things right." Elena's heart leapt, but she stayed guarded. "What does that mean?" Thomas cleared his throat, his hands clasped tightly. "What you did at the church was disrespectful. But we've been talking and we realize we may have acted too harshly." Elena's breath caught. Was this an apology? She glanced at Caleb, who gave her a small nod, as if to say he'd been part of this. But her mother's next words tempered her hope. We're willing to forgive you, Margaret said, her tone measured. If you end this relationship and come back to the church, we can put this behind us. The words hit Elena like a slap. She felt Maya tense beside her, her hand tightening in hers. Forgive me, Elena said, her voice rising. You declared me dead. You held a funeral. And now you think I'll just come back and pretend I'm not who I am. You're our daughter, Thomas said, his voice gruff. We want you in our lives, but not like this. Elena laughed, a sharp, hollow sound. Not like this? This is me, Dad. I love Maya. I'm not going to change that to make you comfortable. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was firm. You're choosing her over us. Again. No, Elena said, her voice steady now. I'm choosing myself. I tried for years to be the daughter you wanted. I wrote you letters, I begged you to listen. You didn't. And now you're asking me to erase who I am to fit your idea of family. Caleb stood, his voice shaking. She's still Elena. Why can't you see that? The room fell silent, the weight of Caleb's words hanging between them. Margaret looked at her son, then at Elena, her expression softening for the first time. We thought we were protecting you, she said quietly. We thought we were doing what was right. Elena's throat tightened. You were wrong. Maya spoke then, her voice calm but firm. Elena is the strongest person I know. She loves you even after everything. But love isn't conditional. You don't get to decide who she is. The room was heavy with tension, but for the first time, Elena saw a crack in her parents' resolve. Margaret reached for the painting Maya had left at the church, still sitting on the coffee table. This is beautiful, she said softly, almost to herself. I didn't expect that. Elena's heart ached, caught between hope and pain. She wanted to believe her parents could change, but she knew it wouldn't happen tonight. I'm not dead, she said, her voice firm. And I'm not going anywhere. If you want me in your lives, you have to accept all of me. She took Maya's hand and walked out, leaving the door open behind her. Caleb followed, catching her on the porch. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I'll keep trying with them. Elena hugged him tightly. I know you will. Weeks passed and Willow Creek began to shift, however slowly. Elena's stand at the church had sparked conversations, some heated, others quiet, that rippled through the town. A few neighbors stopped by Maya's apartment with casseroles and hesitant apologies. Others kept their distance, their silence a judgment of its own. But Elena felt lighter, as if shedding her family's lie had freed something inside her. She and Maya made plans to leave for Seattle in the spring, where Maya's family had promised them a fresh start. The idea of a new city, one where they could walk hand in hand without fear, filled Elena with hope. But she wasn't ready to let go of Willow Creek entirely, not while Caleb was still here, not while there was a chance for change. Caleb became a regular visitor, sneaking away from home to meet them at the coffee shop or the park. He brought stories of their parents' arguments, of Margaret rereading Elena's letters, of Thomas questioning the pastor's sermons. They're not there yet, Caleb said one afternoon, tossing pebbles into the pond. But they're thinking about it. Elena nodded, her heart caught between gratitude and caution. That's more than I expected. One evening, as winter settled over Willow Creek, Elena and Maya attended a town meeting at the community center. It was a risk. Public spaces were still fraught with tension, but Maya had been invited to display her art, and Elena refused to let her go alone. The room was crowded, the air buzzing with anticipation. Maya's paintings lined the walls, vibrant and unapologetic, drawing whispers and nods. To Elena's surprise, Margaret was there, standing quietly near the back. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment neither moved. Then Margaret approached, her steps hesitant, clutching a small notebook. I read your letters again, Margaret said, her voice low. All of them. I didn't realize how much you were hurting. Elena's breath caught, her heart pounding. I tried to tell you, she said, her voice soft but steady. Margaret nodded, her eyes wet. I know. I was wrong. I'm not saying I understand everything, but I want to try. I don't want to lose you. The words were fragile, imperfect, but they were a start. Elena felt Maya's hand in hers, grounding her as always. It's going to take time, Elena said. But I'm here. Margaret offered a small smile, the first Elena had seen in years. Can I meet you both for coffee sometime? Elena glanced at Maya, who nodded, her eyes warm. We'd like that, Elena said. The meeting ended with Maya's paintings drawing a crowd, some praising her work, others asking questions about the stories behind them. Elena watched, her heart swelling with pride. This was their life, messy, imperfect, but theirs. Months later, as spring bloomed, Elena and Maya packed their bags for Seattle. Caleb helped, his laughter filling the apartment as he teased them about their packing skills. Margaret had started joining them for coffee, awkward at first but slowly warming to Maya's quiet humor. Thomas was slower to come around, but he'd stopped attending the church's most rigid services, a small but meaningful shift. On their last day in Willow Creek, Elena visited the church one final time, not to confront, but to say goodbye. She left a new letter on the altar, simple but clear. I'm alive. I'm happy. I hope one day you'll celebrate that with me. As they drove out of town, Maya's hand in hers, Elena looked back at the fading skyline of Willow Creek. She'd walked into her own funeral and come out stronger, her love for Maya a beacon that had guided her through the dark. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was theirs, and that was enough. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.